Careful.
Hi, Leo.
Hi, Mom.
Okay, we're going to take a look at this book. And first, before we start looking at the book, I see you completed your reading interest inventory. So let's just review this really quickly. This had a lot of questions about things that you like now and things that you've liked in the past in regard to reading. So it says here that you prefer reading books as opposed to other sorts of things like magazines or journals. What genre? It says fantasy. What did you like to read when you were younger? Dinosaur books and comics. Do you enjoy when someone read to you? Yes. Name a few of your favorite books. Aragon, Eldest, Prisoner, and Inheritance. TV, comedy. Okay, so as I go down the list here, I see mostly things that have to do with fantasy. And let's take a look at what sort of things you like to do when you were younger, playing outside. Do you enjoy writing? Yes, but only when I'm interested in the subject. Okay, that's a good point. What are some of your hobbies? You like to fish, swim, drive, play guitar, sing, go mudding, weld, go to concerts. Okay. So I also noticed, and this is interesting too because of what you said, the kind of books that you have read. And one of the things that you did, I don't know if you remember when you did this, the metacognitive reading inventory, just about your habits when you read. And one thing I noticed, which I thought was interesting, it said, my decision to choose a book from a library is based on how long it is. And I remember when you read some of these books.
There was just no other option, so
I
just circled that one.
Well, see, what came to my mind was something like this, when you said Aragon, Eldest, and I remembered that a lot of these had kind of interesting graphics on the cover.
Yeah.
You know, so that might have been something that interested you.
That was smart, too.
Okay, and then one other thing I thought was interesting, which will, you know, kind of be something that we're going to cover today, and that is when I read nonfiction that I want to read, and then the thing that you marked is think of questions that I want to get answered to. That's one of the things we're going to be looking at today, is different types of questions you might ask when you're reading in order to either understand it better or just to find out more about what you're reading. So this book here, you chose this book actually during the school year to read, and then you decided not to read it.
I forgot.
Yeah. So let's take a look at this book. Let's take a look at the cover. What's the title of this book?
The Greatest Generation.
And who's the author?
Tom Brokaw.
Okay, so do you know anything about Tom Brokaw?
He was raised in a military camp before soldiers get shipped out. Okay,
so his dad was in the military, right? So if you look at do you know anything else about him? Like, what does he do now? What is his job?
No.
He was a correspondent. He worked as a journalist, and he worked on, one of the primetime shows, like a news show. So if you look at this picture, because I think you're a lot of times interested in graphics and in artwork, what do you notice about this?
It's finished one of those classic old pictures where the lady and the man are together, and he's leaving for the military.
Okay, what makes you think he's leaving for the military? Well, you already kind of.
Backpack.
Okay, good. He has a pack, and right now this probably looks different than what guys in the military wear now. But this was pretty common. You know, they wear a dressier type shoe, and then you can see his pant leg. So maybe they're saying goodbye to each other. What do you think about the title? What does that mean?
It explains the author's opinion.
Okay.
What generation is best.
Okay, very good. So it could be the author's opinion, and it could lead to something further too. So let's take a look at this. What was the reason why you did choose it to begin with?
Because Grandpa was going to read it and never got around to it.
Okay, well, that's kind of what I was leading to next. I'm glad you brought that up, because we're going to just think about a few things here. And we talked a little bit of what you know about the book, and what you can see just from looking at the cover. And some connections sometimes that you can make to your reading a lot of times helps you in your interest, and then in maybe comprehension too, and in continuing, to want to read the book. So something that you did probably when you were younger, and you worked with a KWL chart, which is something that we're going to just think about a few things that you know, which we've already been talking about, and some things that you want to know. So you told me some things about what you already know, and you know that this looks like it's related to the military, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then what was the reason you said you wanted to read it?
Because of Grandpa.
Okay, and what about Grandpa? What do you know about him? And
he was in World War II.
And he was in World War II. Okay, good. And do you know what he did in World War II?
He was an infantryman.
Basically, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right.
And do you know much else about it? What he did?
No.
That's another point. Did you remember anything about when you read?
What he did?
Well,
what his dad did?
In the first part, he was talking about
what his dad did.
What his dad did.
He pretty much was maintenance around the base.
Okay, and what some of the other men did. And then he was talking a little bit about when he was trying to write this book, and he was trying to interview people. Do you remember anything he talked about with that?
Not off the top of my head.
One thing, and maybe we can go back and reread, that he mentioned was it was very hard to get information from these men because they didn't talk about it very much. And that was kind of one of the things, and maybe one of the reasons why you don't know too much about why Grandpa or what he did, is because a lot of people didn't talk about it too much. And that's something pretty interesting about this story. And he talks about why it is that they didn't talk about it very much. Okay, so we talked about some of the things you know and some connections you could make. What about some of the things that you want to know?
As in how the story progresses, or more about World War II.
Okay.
Or like what I'm not understanding what you were asking.
Okay. So you want to know more about the war?
Yeah.
Anything else rather than just the war itself? Like historical. Okay, so this book, interestingly, is not necessarily about fantasy, right? Some people, and when you see movies, you see things that...
I like war books and movies.
Okay.
I enjoy those also.
And sometimes they're romanticized and they're not real. But the interesting thing about this is really about the people and the people's story. So if you were interested in finding a little bit more about that generation, or even maybe more about your grandfather, that might be something that you might also want to know. Okay, we're going to take a quick look at this book, and I'm going to just have you read to yourself these, let's see, I'm going to have you read to yourself these two paragraphs, okay?
Which ones?
This paragraph and this paragraph, okay? Okay. All right. And looking back at what you read, this is only two paragraphs from what you read before, but we're going to just kind of focus on these two paragraphs. I want you to think about some questions you can ask. Let's say you were in a position like I was, and you were either helping someone, tutoring someone, or maybe you were just talking to someone about the book. And you might ask them, what is one fact that you read about?
Are you asking me?
Well, I'm asking you to come up with a question.
What was the title given to the children born by the people more?
Okay, very good. So that's a fact, right?
Yeah.
So how would you find that answer if you went back?
You reread or you skim, either one.
Okay. Okay, so what was the title given to it?
Baby boomers.
Okay, and the answer is baby boomers. Okay, good. All right, now, another type of question is called an inference question. What does the word inference mean?
That's one.
Well,
Or insight, or I don't know.
Infer, that's the root word.
Yeah, to give information.
Okay, so to infer something means it's different from a fact in that I might ask you a question and you have to infer an answer, which means you would go back and look at the information or think about what you know and basically draw a conclusion, okay? So can you think of an inference question?
Restate.
I'll give you an example. Want an example?
Yeah.
Okay. So, in reading these two paragraphs, some things that they talked about basically were what they did when they came back from the war, okay? And some of those things were what? What were
They
some?
went back and got an education.
Okay, they went back and got educations. They went on to get into different types of careers and talks about industry, science, art, public policy. So what can you infer from this sort of contribution that they made? If you look at things we have now and things that
The
they...
GI Bill.
Okay, GI Bill was one of them. What else can you infer? That's not a fact. That's not written here. But it's based on these facts. Maybe about the kind of contributions that they made to society. Okay, let me give you an example. Even though it doesn't say they did, it tells us that they were a new kind of army now, and they went into all of these different fields. What do you think they did in those kind of fields? What do you think they did in their jobs?
It depends on what job they got.
Okay, can you make a general statement about what they might have done? Let's say someone who went into the automotive industry at that time. Let's say they got a job working at Ford or Chrysler.
What are you asking?
Well, I'm asking you to make an inference. Okay, here's the point I'm trying to make. You might infer from this, they went into all these fields. It also says some things up here about how they were successful and how they really were goal-oriented because they were an army and they were using the skills that they had learned during the war. So I guess what I'm trying to say is an inference would be...
They were already good at it.
Okay, they were already good at it, and so they would be very good at their jobs. Okay, that's exactly what I mean. So it doesn't say here they'd be good at their jobs, as a fact, but you can infer that they would be pretty good at their jobs, and they would continue to be goal-oriented, wanting to take care of their family, wanting to be, good citizens and contributing members of society. Okay. And then finally, another type of question would be just about a vocabulary word. Are there any vocabulary words in there that you didn't understand or anything new? Or
No.
No? I was thinking actually when you asked about what was the title given to the children born from that era,
a baby boomer and what they are.
Right, that's what I had originally
Baby
been thinking of, of being a vocabulary word. So it could be a baby boomer, could be a vocabulary word. Okay. All right. So those are 3 types of things that we would be looking at when we read. All right. Okay, what if I give you, for example, just a couple of facts. And so this has to do with listening and not reading, but it's still going to be about inference. If I was to tell you it's rained a lot the last week, and it's been pretty sunny and warm, and when I look outside, I see that there are a lot of weeds growing. What might you infer from that? This is for me.
Someone should deal with the weeds.
Yes, but see, yeah, I have sitting out there something that I need to do. But that's a good inference, okay? Can you think of something? Make up a question for me. It can be based on anything. It could be based on something that's happened recently, or maybe something,
An inference, as in like when you said it's something that needs to be done. If you've noticed, we always have food in the house, but sometimes it's not the food that everybody likes, but one specific person likes.
Okay.
Do you think anything could be done about that?
So the inference for me would be, I should put on the grocery list.
Yes.
So that I purchase it. Okay. Now, the other thing about an inference, though, now, of course, we were just doing a verbal inference based on facts that we're giving each other. If I went back and, when I asked you a question based on this, I was kind of pointing some things out here to lead you to an inference. And what you need when you have an inference, or even a fact, sometimes if you're looking for a fact, you need to find something to support it. So if we figured out that, what would they be doing, or what did they contribute to society, what could we infer from the facts that were here, then what are some of the facts that led us to the conclusion that they would be successful in their jobs and that they would be...
The fact that they got an education.
Okay. They used the GI Bill. It said they had full classrooms on campuses. Okay. Anything else? Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. What I'd like to do then is I just want to have you read something out loud. Okay? And this is going to lead us into our next lesson. Okay? So what I'd like you to do is read, I'm going to have you start here at they helped. And I'm going to have you just read this one short paragraph. Okay?
How long? Or in?
Yeah, just this paragraph.
In here? Or
you can read it first silently, yes, and then I'll have you read it out loud. Alright. So can you give me a brief summary of what this paragraph was about?
He's talking about the distaste of what America had started to become when they got back.
Okay. Does it mention any particular time period that they're referring to that they don't like?
Mm. 60s
The
or 70s.
60s. Okay, good. Yeah. So do you remember what was happening in the 60s? There was a war that was occurring at that time.
Yeah.
What was that?
The Vietnam.
Okay, yeah, Vietnam. And they saw that as being very
War.
much different. Yeah, that they didn't, a lot of people didn't even consider that as being a war or even a just war like World War II was. So they were, very frustrated, and they were also disappointed, I think, when they saw people who didn't have respect for their country or for the flag. Okay. Can you think of an inference question? We kind of talked about a few factual things that we looked for. We looked for the time period, the 60s. Can you make any inference?
Yeah. The veterans coming into the 60s didn't like long hair and what they thought of as desecration of the flag. Are there any other things that they didn't like that you could think of possible?
Okay. All right.
Is that an inference? Or
I think that could be an inference, yes. Okay, good. All right, then we're just going to do one last thing here, I think, and because what we're going to go into in the next lesson is repeated reading, which is going to be reading silently and then reading out loud, okay, and taking turns with doing some of those things. And we're going to work a little bit on fluency. So just to be kind of an introduction to that, but the paragraph you just read, I'm just going to have you read that out loud, and then I think we'll be done and with this part of the lesson. We'll take a break.
they helped rebuild the economies and political institutions of their former enemies, and they stood fast against the totalitarianism of their former allies, the Russians. They were rocked by social and political upheaval of the 60s, and many of them hated the long hair, the free love, and especially what they saw as desecration of the flag. They didn't give up on the new generation.
Okay, good. All right, so what we're going to do is, I think this is something you did during the school year, have a bookmark with the title and author of the book, and then you can fill in on any vocabulary words that you might be interested in or that you didn't quite understand or you have a question on. Okay, for next time, I'm just going to have you read, this was basically the introduction, and the first chapter is called The Time of Their Lives. Okay, so I'll have you read the first chapter, and you can go on to the second chapter if you want. At this time, I'll have you just read the first chapter. And then, before we go, I want you to write down one thing. You can write down either fact or a question that has to do with the introduction that we read. If you want to write it as a question yourself, or you could write it as something that you want to know more about. All right, thank you. That's it for now. Oh, okay, good, you're right, and that's what we'll learn a little bit more about. Alrighty, thank you.